ลิตวานเมตังสเมตามปะทันตาอาวิคิตจิตตาปริตังปนันตุสักขีกาเมจรูเปกิริสิกรตเตจันตลิเกวิมาเนทีเปรเตจะคาเมตรวนาคาเนเคหาวตุมิเคเตภุมมาจยันตุเทวาชัลลทลวิสเมยขคันทัพพนาคาติทันตาสันติเกยังมุนิวนวจรังสาทโวเมสุนันตุธัมมาสวนากาโลอายัมปทันตาธัมมาสวนากาโลอายัมปทันตาธัมมาสวนากาโลอายัมปทันตา
น Pado Nakine Sabamangalang Ragandu Padevana Sababuddha Nivarena Sada Sodi Bhavantu Te Bhavantu Sabamangalang Ragandu Padevana Sabadhamma Nivarena Sada Sodi Bhavantu Te Bhavantu Sabamangalang Ragandu Padevana Sabasanganu Bhavena Sada Sodi Bhavantu Te.
It's a common question. Can people hear? Ask me, because I'm American by birth, why I chose to come to England rather than the United States. And I never actually ever thought I'd be living in England. It was not one of my expectations. But the reason was very much because in 1976, my parents lived in Southern California. My mother was very ill, and they had this swine flu epidemic at the time. And so my father wanted me to come home. They thought my mother was quite critically ill, so I went back to the United States for the first time. I left in 1963 and returned 1976. And I was in contact with my parents, of course, through the post, but other than that, I determined to stay as a Buddhist monk. And so in order to get back to Thailand, I had to fly to London and connect to a Thai Airways flight. At that time, in 1976, Thai International Airways didn't reach America. They hadn't expanded that far, but they did go to London. So my mother, her health recovered well enough. I went to the East Coast. I determined to kind of, in Thailand at that time was in a critical state. Laos, Cambodia had become communist. Vietnam the Americans had fled Vietnam, and they thought Thailand might go next. There was a domino theory. And so that was, and I remember living in Ubon, which is northeast Thailand, borders on both Cambodia and Laos, a kind of terrible panic throughout the whole country. There was a strong communist movement in Thailand at the time. And so I thought, first thoughts of returning to the West occurred in 1976. And then, of course, my mother, necessity to go back to the States, see my parents. I had in mind that I would keep open to possibilities of establishing some monastery. I thought it would be in the United States. And so I was thinking of, we had that time at Nanachat, we had about 22 bhikkhus, Western bhikkhus living there. And I remember sitting there looking at them and thinking, what's going to happen to all of these monks if Thailand goes communist? And then and also I thought, if I establish a monastery of Ajahn Chahs in the United States, then I could even rescue Luang Por Chah if necessary. So I had this kind of idea in my mind, but during my time in the States, people showed no interest other than they wanted me to be a meditation teacher or give retreats, things like that, but nothing about monasticism. They didn't seem to have slightest bit of interest in those days. And so I went from Southern California, went to New York and Boston, and then I flew to London. to get the Thai flight back to Thailand, and I had to wait about 3 or 4 days. And some of you might remember in 1976, they had this very hot summer. In London, the weather was very warm. I stayed at the Hampstead Vihara, walk up on Hampstead Heath, and London looks really beautiful in the sunlight. and then before I left Thailand, I was Ajahn Panyawado, a British monk who was very well known in Britain. I think he, at one time, but I think he left in 1961, wasn't it? And went to Thailand. And he found his teacher, Ajahn Mahabua, in Udon Thani, it's in the northeast. And so he never really wanted to come back. And so many of Ajahn Panyawado's disciples here in England were waiting for his return. And so when I went to, when those 3 brief days in London, I met George Sharp due to Ajahn Panyawado. He gave me George Sharp's telephone number and said, if you need a place to stay, phone George. So that I did. I phoned George, and I stayed at the Hampstead Vihara. And during that time, George would come every evening and talk to me about practice, about establishing a monastery in England. And suddenly I realized that the English Sangha Trust was set up for the support of Theravadan bhikkhus without any strings attached. Yeah, they made it very clear that it was to support so that Theravadan monks could come and live in the UK. Of course, they called it the English Sangha Trust, and so I suppose just England. But in those days, people didn't have these European ideas or expansive views. But and it was, then I found out that Ajahn Panyawado and Ajahn Mahabua had been to this Hampstead Vihara 2 years before I arrived, and George had definitely taken his training from them, from Ajahn Panyawado and Ajahn Mahabua, because at that time the English Sangha Trust had 20 years of failures. Nothing seemed to work, and by 1976 it was closed. You know, it was, they had the place, the house in Hampstead, but other than that there was nobody really in it. So George had taken his advice, and Ajahn Panyawado had encouraged him to just close the vihara and wait for somebody to come along. And then that somebody happened to be me. But I was very impressed because I never met any in the States or any other place such a something so ready to and so eager to support Theravadan monks in the Western world. Ajahn Panyawado had spent most of his monastic life with Ajahn Mahabua, and he died actually, when was that, about 7 years ago, and he's very highly regarded in Thailand. They had a very magnificent funeral for him, and he also influenced many Western monks who have trained with him and Luang Tapua. And I became aware that here in England, the people, the generation of Ajahn Panyawada was very old or no longer living. And then George, of course, remembered, and so Jane Brown from Devon, and these people had been very devoted to and respected Ajahn Panyawado. And so I thought it's important to remember him, bring back the memory of this fine bhikkhu back into his native soil. So we had a portrait painted in Chiang Mai by an artist that George met there a few years ago. And that portrait is now hanging over there next to the shrine of Luang Pu Man. And this is to honor this monk, Ajahn Panyawado, and then one of his students, one of his disciples, an American monk called Ajahn Dick. He also was trained and lived with Ajahn Panyawado for many years, so he wrote a biography, which many of you received this morning. The biography of Ajahn Panyawado. I never really lived with him, so I didn't know him that well, but Ajahn Dick was very well acquainted with him and trained with him during his early years. Now he's living in the States. He's establishing a monastery in, I think, Virginia. So today I thought would be a good day to unveil the portrait of Ajahn Panyawado, bring to honor him as a British monk, one of the early pioneers, at that time when he became ordained, there were hardly any Western men in robes. It was a very odd thing to be doing, very courageous, and then putting himself in a society that he had to go through the adjustments to culture and climate and so forth. But he's still highly regarded and held up within the Thai tradition at this time. So this effort of mine to make his memory more available to people living here in Britain, because actually this monastery probably wouldn't have existed if Ajahn Panyawado had not been around and had not encouraged me to come here. Now the unveiling.
So the next part of the ceremonies for this morning is the Acharya Puja, the formal asking for forgiveness from Lumpur Sumedho for anything that we might have done by body, speech or mind, intentionally or unintentionally, that has been irritating to him, painful in any way. And so we request his forgiveness. This is as many people know, this is a traditional way of, say, expressing gratitude and devotion for the teacher, and also a way of the teacher expressing their sense of care and commitment for the students. And so we'll be leading this Ajahn Tiradhammo, as the most senior bhikkhu here, will be leading the request for forgiveness, and then after the first part of the ceremony has come, then that will be the time to offer other gifts to Lumpur from the Sangha.
There's 5 volumes of my teaching. But I don't look at this as I don't like to consider it Ajahn Sumedho's teaching as just reflections on Dhamma. It's the Buddha's teaching. So I don't, just to get it right. It's not original and personal. I have used, I oftentimes refer to how I dealt with emotional problems like anger or fear and that, and so that's just encouragement of somebody that a person that's alive now, how they deal with, say, anxiety, worry, and fears and neurotic tendencies, because sometimes when we read scripture, it gets too idealistic. You don't get sometimes you don't feel that it may not apply that much to your own particular personal problems at this time. But so I've always found it very helpful, like when Luang Por Chah would talk about how he dealt with very strong emotional blocks or problems, and I found that very encouraging. Because when I first met Luang Por Chah, I idealized him. I thought, well, he's an enlightened master. He probably never had problems like I do. Like he was born, and walked on 7 lotus flowers and was pure and never had to deal with anger or fear or anything of that nature. So we can idolize, project onto teachers and that these as if they were perfect from the beginning, and then we look at ourselves and we see we suffer a lot from self-consciousness, and so much of modern neuroses are just the kind of anxieties we create around our lives. And even though in modern affluent societies such as this one, which does everything to try to create security, the illusion of it anyway, increases the anxiety, because this is a common human problem. And then the Buddha put that in the first sermon, the structure, the noble truths based on dukkha or suffering. You can translate dukkha as anxiety, fear, whatever way you want, but it's that mental state that we create ourselves that makes our lives very unhappy and full of fears and anxieties. So in the teaching, that I've always been tried to be very faithful to the Four Noble Truths, as many of you are aware, because I found that such a profound and useful teaching. It always impressed me that it's first sermon, after enlightenment, and yet within that teaching itself, it's a perfect teaching. If all the other scriptures, all the rest of the Tripitaka and so forth suddenly vanished out of sight, and all we had left was the Four Noble Truths, that would be enough. I mean, it's the way to non-suffering, and so it's a tool that I encourage to use, and you have to make it work. Though it has no, just to worship it and to praise it and to read it and to analyze it is one thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but the main point of Buddha's teaching is the bhatipata side. Put it into practice, make it work for you. Like I can only encourage, I can't make it work for you. If I had a magic wand, I could, create this perfect understanding of the Four Noble Truths by waving it around. I'd do it. I don't like to see any of you suffer. But I can't do it. And of course the Buddha couldn't either. In the scriptures, the history of the Buddha, he gave a teaching in which we had to to take that teaching and apply it to the reality of our own lives. And it's a simple teaching, and it's based on a common factor, isn't it, of suffering. This is the common bond we share with all creatures, in fact. The birth, old age, sickness, death, we have fears, we have desires, we have jealousy, we have greed and mental confusion and so forth. These are not, there's no mystery or particular emphasis that this applies more to one group or another. It's the common factor, no matter what religion, race, nationality you're aligned with. This noble teaching of the Noble Truths is about our human condition and how to understand it. And I've had the good fortune to have this opportunity to put it into practice and to learn from it and be able to resolve my own personal problems, fears, emotional habits that I've had to live with or experience in life, both in the monastic life, even though it's not a magic formula, but it is a helpful reflection. It's a form that keeps reminding us to wake up and pay attention and not to get lost in all the problems that the world creates or that you create about yourself and the world. After all these years of using this teaching, my trust and faith in it, and I think it's an absolutely perfect formula that can be applied to anyone, because it takes this common factor of suffering, and just by changing your attitude to suffering, you begin to understand what it is to be a human being, what it is to be a sensitive form, what it is to be afraid of death and wanting pleasure and not wanting pain, and success, fear of failure, and loss, fear of loss, and wanting something to be something it can't be, trying to create an illusory world, a utopian dream that can never really happen because it's not based on Dhamma, on reality. It's based on maybe high-minded ideas. And at this time, I think this particular teaching has a great, important message. It's very valuable at a time where there are so many problems. The world is now a very confused place. You don't have, the problems that arise endlessly about destruction and war and injustice and power struggling and racial prejudices and so forth. And these are created out of the human mind, out of ignorance, not understanding the Noble Truths. So here at Amaravati, the monastery here and in Thailand, there is this opportunity to learn, to study, to practice, and it's not something that is not about ancient history or some exotic country in Asia. It's about the reality of here and now. So on my 80th birthday, my birthday present is to this encouragement to see the power and the practicality and the usefulness of this particular teaching that the Buddha gave to us 2,557 years ago. And the proof of its validity is that it's still pure teaching. It's not been corrupted. The Four Noble Truths, when you chant the Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta, which is the Pali version of his first sermon, nobody's corrupted that. It's the pure teaching. And then to put that into practice, the Bhatipata Ajahn Chah was, the word he used constantly, even before when I was learning the Thai language, I had to sit through hours of listening to Luang Por Chah and give Dhamma talks, and one word I kept hearing was bhatibat. In Thai they say it, bhatibat. He said, this is a monastery for bhatibat, and I kept hearing this word bhatibat. And it's taken from the Pali word bhatibata, which is practice, or making it work. It's not about belief or anything, and it tells you how to do it. It's not just a kind of confused teaching that you hope you understand. It's a way of taking the most common experience we have and using it for investigation of the present, of the suffering, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, whatever it might be in the present, is like this. And through this simple practice, then you have the insight, you have understanding, you have wisdom that guides you in your life, rather than just struggling with ideas or personal, or just trying to improve your personality or try to suppress your feelings or fears and emotions. It's about understanding this realm that we're experiencing through wisdom. So I offer this as my present to you on my birthday. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhutang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi bhutang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi puthang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Ti sarana gamanang nititang. Banadipata veramani sikkhabadang samadhiyami. Adina dana veramani sikkhabadang samadhiyami. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhabadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhabadang samadhiyami. Sura Niraya Machabama Tatana Veramani Sikkhabadang Samadhiyami. Himani Pancha Sikkhabadani Silena Sukhatinyanti Silena Bhoga Sambadha Silena Niputinyanti Dasama Silang Mitsotaye.
So this is the formal offering of Sanghadana. That's the presentation of different things that are useful to the community, all the alms food that has been brought today, also the many things given to Lumpur today, and also other things useful for the monastery terms of robes and support. Also, I should like to mention, even though she might feel a bit shy, one of our devoted supporters, who has been a student of Luang Por Sumedho since he first arrived in Hampstead, made an offering of £100,000 today to particularly on the occasion of Luang Por's birthday, to support Amaravati and to keep the Dharma wheel turning and keep the roofs on the buildings. So sadhu anumotana indeed. So I'll just make a few practical announcements now. So at the moment, a few other monks are receiving the alms food on behalf of the whole community. And when that has been completed, then they will come and let us know that the alms food is all ready and prepared. At that time, then Caroline Leinster, who's the secretary of the English Sangha Trust, she will be doing the traffic control today for the helping to let people know what's the best way to take care of leaving the building, going to the sala, helping yourself to food, and looking after those practical arrangements. So as the nuns and monks are leaving the temple, please don't immediately engage in conversation, but listen for a few announcements from Caroline, as she will help to move things along in a smooth way. Also, I'd like to mention to people this morning is only half of the program for today, also because not only is it Luang Por's 80th birthday, it's also Sunday and during the Rains retreat, so he's kindly offered to give the Sunday afternoon Dhamma talk, and the theme, big surprise, is the way it is. We thought that would be a fairly safe bet to choose that as a title. So. Well, we love to hear you say it again, Luang Por. So that will be beginning at 2 o'clock here in the temple. So those of you who are, say, able to stay for the rest of the day, then please bear that in mind. And also in terms of helping to tidy up, do the washing up and tidying up the sala after the mealtime, we would appreciate many helping hands to assist with that. Be much appreciated by the kitchen team, and also just Luang Por was talking about Luang Por Chah's way of training, patipat. Well, practice doesn't just mean sitting with your eyes closed in the meditation hall. It also means keeping your eyes open and seeing whether the dishes have been done, and can you lend a hand, and do things need to be moved from A to B, so that that kind of broad view, kind of what we call circumspection, looking around, seeing what needs to be done, what's the time, the place, the situation. This is the kind of mindfulness that really does lead to deathlessness. And so I encourage everybody to be attentive and helpful, and to be, say, lending a hand in the spirit of this occasion. Also, our neighbours on St Margaret's Lane really appreciate people mindfully driving along the lane. We share this space together with the other humans and the other small creatures, four-legged creatures, feathered creatures. So do drive carefully. The speed limit is 30, but you can even drive at 20. Just to be attentive and careful and thoughtful for the other people that we share our lives with, the other people on the lane in particular. So that's your care and attention and thoughtfulness is much appreciated there. So the other thing I should mention, this afternoon there'll be the talk will be here in the temple. Tea will be offered after the talk is finished and before the question and answer period. That'll be in the sala. We'll have a slightly longer break, so from 3 to 3:30 will be the tea and refreshments, and then the questions and answer period will be back here in the temple, and then that will be a short period for Dhamma discussion and questions. And at the end of that, then Luang Por will also be available to hand out some more of the Dhamma books. Those of you who weren't here this morning or didn't receive the Dhamma books that have been printed for this occasion, Luang Por will be happy to stay around for a little bit longer to offer more Dhamma books, even more Dhamma, to everybody at the end of the afternoon. So please do put that into your consciousness, and so there'll be a time for receiving books from Luang Por later on today as well. The biography of Luang Por Panyawato and this 5-volume set of Luang Por Sumedho's teachings and other books of Dhamma as well. I've just been told the food has been received, so this is the time for chanting the Anumodana. Many people have come together today to offer dana. So this is from the Juan Bui family. The dedication is, I'd like to offer dana in memory of those who were killed in the Malaysian MH17 plane crash. Please include them in your prayers and pujas. May the goodness that arises from today's dana bring spiritual benefits to those involved in this tragedy. Also, dana is being offered from Huang Lin and Bui Ti Tam. The dedication for today's offerings also to Mrs. Tsang Mun Jung, who passed away on the 22nd of July last year, and Mr. Sun Chi Tak, who passed away on the 17th of June this year. Also, today is Anagarika Maurizio's birthday. So, is Anagarika from the Italian Vihara? So I'm not sure what the Italian for happy birthday is, but Felicidad. So we will now see some more offerings arriving in the doorway, so please step up. I should also mention, it's very remiss to forget to mention Jane Brown, who is mentioned by Luang Por in his talk about Luang Por Panyawada. She is very instrumental in helping for the offering of the portrait and for the biography to be printed. She is very unwell. She was a disciple of Venerable Ajahn Mahabua since the early 60s. She visited Wat Bantat when there weren't even any roads, back in like 1962, 63. Had to go by boat and across the fields to get there. So she's an intrepid Dharma warrior, but she's been laid low both by shingles and by a broken collarbone. So it took a few things to stop her coming, but she would very much like to have been here, and this ceremony is being recorded particularly for her, and so also like to dedicate the punya from today for Jane's welfare and benefit, and out of gratitude for her many, many years of support for the Sangha. So now the monastic community will pay our respects to the shrine and file out, and Caroline Leinster will make some announcements for all of you.